a fun time doing it. We've had a few items, a few races and events already over and done with. The Grand Prix being one, it was certainly moved ahead a lot earlier this year than even we had suspected, but we have lots of interesting items to bring you over the season from that particular weekend, as we usually do. We have our usual run of events, from anything from parking lot slaloms to racing at Atlantic Motorsport Park. We have a 40th anniversary rally that we recently had for ASCC, and we have some interesting shots to give you there during Tropical Storm Barry, believe it or not. I think that was the highest entry for a local rally in recent memory, and maybe it was the rain that brought us out, who knows. But anyway, we certainly have a few things to bring you this show to start off with. Actually, the crew happened to be in Stellarton. I wasn't able to attend, but they happened to drop into a local new museum there with some very interesting items. And actually, one of the items that has been caught for you on film is called the Victorian, or a horseless carriage. I've seen a few of the shots of it. It looks really interesting indeed. It's probably the first vehicle assembled in Canada, about 1895, I understand. John MacArthur, who was a furniture maker who had moved back to Hopewell, Nova Scotia from California. I don't know why anybody would move back from California with recent weather, but anyway, probably fear of earthquakes. He was operating a furniture factory, and he decided to buy some plans and parts for this particular vehicle from the United States. The Victorian, as a result of this effort, and it's now in the Nova Scotia Museum of Industry in Stellarton, as I mentioned earlier, a new museum, probably an interesting one to check out if you're in the area doing the tourist thing sometime this summer. It's just a few miles from Hopewell. Bart Armstrong talked with museum maintenance engineer Ken Joyce. We had a camera there, too. We were able to catch some of it for you and bring you our first show of our 23rd season.
Well, it's a twin cylinder, horizontally opposed. The two cylinders are laying flat, like you have a cylinder in the front, one in the back. So they're laying flat with the crankshaft in the center. I would estimate it would be about 4 to 6 horsepower. And that's based on the same size engine, like in a marine-type engine. We haven't had the heads off it to get the bore and stroke. It seems to have a very short stroke by the size of the cylinder here. But it's a big bore, so I would say it's probably about 5 by 5-inch bore, or 5-inch stroke maybe. 4-inch stroke possibly. The crank on the far side, and you'd advance your spark retard on the magneto. And it's called, it's very similar to what they call a jump spark. They used a 6-volt battery to create power to feed the coils. An old dry cell battery, very similar like the old radio batteries used to be. The coils to increase the voltage for the fire the spark plug. I think the crank is in storage. It's probably, the crank is very simple. It's adaptable to just about any type of engine. Now what's nice about this, it has the 3 combustion chambers on the top of the cylinder head, so the spark plug is actually not even in the cylinder, it's out here, which would fire and the charge in through. This is a water tank. Well, if you stop and think, those Chevys and Ford pickup trucks had the gas tank behind the seat for years. I would say, just based the way the transmission is geared and stuff, I would say it probably could go 6 to 8, 10 miles an hour. I know some of our records say up to 5 miles an hour, but I think it could go quite a little bit faster. See, she's almost like a direct drive affair. You have your on the end of your crank, you have your small gear here going to a kind of an idler here, which transfers the power from the gear to a chain. It's just the one gear. It just reduces the engine RPM down to make it more operable. There's sort of a flywheel affair to kind of balance off the drive down on the front down here. And then your chain went right straight back to the rear end, which is basically the same type of rear end that's in use today. Except for the chain drive, we would use a drive shaft, crown and pinion, but the spider gears are the same. They allow for either wheel to, going around the corners, your axles were independent. With the chain, the guy that built it had probably a better idea by, more direct drive. Belts back then weren't that dependable. It's a single carburetor. A lot of those engines had a carburetor for each cylinder, but this one here has a manifold and a single carburetor plumb to each cylinder. Now in here, the gas tank, it didn't hold very much, but of course then the car didn't go very far, so it just set in the pocket in here and hooked onto the hose over to the carburetor. And that would just hold maybe 2.5 gallons. You'd run a long time on a gallon of gas. And you see your lubricators, he had to take the seat up here to reach this lubricator. They just give a squirt into the bearings every so often. The squirt oil would last for quite a little while. But because your power is taken off this side of the engine, it's on the side of the car down here. Then there's a cross shaft that goes across here. This chain here drives the cross shaft, which is underneath the middle of the car. And that transfers the power over to the center of the car, back to the chain. I suppose you could run this thing for a couple of hours on a gallon. You know, it's so small it wouldn't burn very much. But that's just basing again on those little marine engines. And the controls are quite simple. They have the steering mechanism, the tiller stick. I think Oldsmobile had this later on in 1904 or so. Mm-hmm. I saw an old car like that. Your brake consists of a band around the differential at the back, and that activated that stopped the rear axle. You push this here, you can see, I'll show you back underneath. See this band here? This is like a brake band and a little drum on here. And when I push that lever, that tightens this band on here and stops the rear end. Because there's no hubs. Your old wooden wheels, they had no place for drums or discs. So and you see the little spider gear setup. It's quite a nice little setup. You see, she got the dual springs on the back, one on each side, but on the front it's just a crossover one. A lot of later cars had this same style of front end. That will be your gas pedal. You have your spark advance over here for starting. You pull this out when you're starting it to retard or advance the timing. And then you had just one lever for the engage in and out of gear. It was one speed, and you had neutral or drive. And with the steering right smack in the center here, it was hard to get the arms to turn, like to have the wheels lined up, you know, because the radius is different in here than it is out here. But he did a really good job because they got just a little curve on the tie rod on the arms here, and this is where your tie rod ends would be in a normal car. But they're just a pin through, see, with a nut and a bolt. And the same here with your kingpin. That's the same style kingpins used today. But the muffler is a steel muffler. They have the drain holes in it in the bottom to, that's where your exhaust would come out. Like there's no tailpipe, it just came out here. It's a heavy steel muffler. It's not like something they have today. You know, some of them horse-drawn wagons were pretty fancy. And I think that's what part of it based on here. That's quite the radiator. You can see it's hollowed out. Well, see, those engines didn't run all that hot. And this one here had water jackets right through the cylinder. So that kept the engine fairly cool. Apparently the engine was built in New York. I don't even know the manufacturer's name, actually. Yeah, the carburetor is not. It's made in Indianapolis, but I don't... It's a possibility that it would be German, but I can't see it. It's a cast unit, one-piece cast iron unit for the crank housing. And then the cylinder heads bolt directly on, very similar to a Volkswagen-style engine, or just about all the engines of that era. Your crankshaft bearings here are grease cups. See, the cups are full of grease, and as you turn the cup down, it forces grease into the bearing. And then there's two spark plugs. It's hard to say how old the engine would be. It's a well-made engine, very well-made. The flywheel is 1.5 foot in diameter. It's a pretty. It's a machined flywheel. It was cast and then machined off to give it a smooth finish, which is probably for balancing. But you can see by the shape of that nut there, that's a handmade nut, you know, from the old blacksmith. A lot of the bolts, these bolts are handmade. Now, the rear end, it's very unique the way it's put together. Like the plumbing on the engine is very similar to the plumbing on the rest of the machine. It's all piped and set it together, you know. There'd be a ritual getting it going. Like, it'd take you a couple hours to fire it up every time you want to use it, you know. It wasn't something that I think was meant to be driven a whole lot. But there's some neat engineering. Like, that's pretty compact to fit all that stuff in that small area.
What an incredible old car. I was talking to our producer, Tony Edwards, while we were watching that clip, and he was explaining to me that the museum had just opened up. And although it is a museum of industry, there's certainly a lot of industry going on. As you could tell in the background there, they were getting ready putting up exhibits. It is open now. We'd like to thank Director John Holt for getting us in and helping us with that interview. It was very interesting. We have some strange connection, I guess, between furniture makers who want to build automobiles. One of the clips we have for you during the season is from an earlier car show, the Kinsman Motorama 95 at Cole Harbor, that's held in the spring of every year. It's always a very popular show, and this year in particular, I don't know if anyone managed to catch the wooden replica Formula One car that a gentleman from Yarmouth had handcrafted. It's an incredible piece of work as well. So there's some direct relationship there that I can't quite fathom, but certainly they do a very good job, and that's an interesting piece. Please look up the Museum of Industry next time you're in Stellarton. It promises to be quite a tour. We have, just to give you a little background into what's been going on with our season locally now, to fast forward to the present. As we had mentioned, our 40th anniversary for the Car Club. The Atlantic Sports Car Club, for people who may not be familiar with the name, although we've been on the air for about 23 years chatting about it, we have some new people, I hope, who are going to be tuning in for this season and keeping an eye on what's going on in the motorsport field. This show in particular likes to concentrate on lots of things to do with competition, be it motorcycles or automobiles. We get involved with remote-controlled boat racing, a little bit of which I managed to take in this year, and we hope to have a show for you with that competition, hopefully in September, a local lake in Bedford being the site for that particular activity. But we like to bring you anything that's engine-oriented, motor-oriented, not just competition. Something like the antique car where you maybe would just walk by if it was a display in a museum, but not have the chance to hear the details that particular engineer was able to divulge to us. Hopefully you'll find that kind of thing interesting. If you're more involved with the competition aspect of it, the Atlantic Sports Car Club does offer a lot for everyone. You don't need to own a race car to belong. Sometimes you don't even need to own a car. We certainly have lots of positions that can be filled by people who enjoy doing timing and scoring for a race or a solo event, checkpointing or helping out with the organization and administration of any of our rallies or other competition events. And we have executive and the mundane minutes and things like that that have to be taken care of too. So it's not something that you need to own a car. You can certainly, if you're just interested in a nice club activity, we seem to have 120 to 150 happy members from any year to the next, and lots of things to offer you. We have regular meetings held the second Tuesday of each month at the CPO's Mess, the Dolphin Room, which is CFB Statacona off Gottingen Street. They're the second Tuesday of the month, and I believe I wrote the date down. August 8th is our next car club meeting. Now, at that kind of a meeting, you will find lots of people who can give you reports on the various activities that have taken place to date, results, and all of the finishers and the winners, as well as upcoming events. We do things, everything from parking lot slaloms, which you may drive by a parking lot on a Sunday afternoon and see. These are orange construction-type pylons that define a course that one car at a time has to go around as quickly as possible without going off course or without hitting a pylon. It may look a little Mickey Mouse on the sidelines, but I guarantee you get out there in a car, it can be a very confusing thing to do. It's a skill driving event. I mentioned one car at a time, so there's no fender-to-fender racing. It's quite safe. It's very interesting from a skill driving point of view, too, because you learn the handling characteristics of your car in a very controlled situation. We do other things during the course of the year, too, at Atlantic Motorsport Park, our only road racing facility in eastern Canada. It's located in Shubenacadie, about 45 minutes north of Halifax. We have car racing events, motorcycle racing events. We also have a high-performance driving school, at least one, maybe two a year, depending on the demand. And at that particular event, you can bring, again, your private passenger vehicle out. We give you classroom instruction first, the theory of apex, cornering, handling characteristics, what to look for, what to do. Then we take you out on the track And actually, I found in the quite a few years that I seem to have been involved with the sport, we have people who come back on an annual basis just for their annual trip around Atlantic Motorsport Park. You get the car tuned up, make sure you've got fresh brakes and tires, and you can go out and have a whole day's worth of fun and not need with the expense of racing or roll cages or driving suits or Nomex. It's fairly basically safety-oriented, but there's no fender-to-fender racing. So it's an ideal controlled situation in which to learn more about the handling characteristics of you and your car. And you can certainly find out more about that. We are wondering about having another event at the end of the year. As I'd mentioned earlier, the Grand Prix was very early this season, and it kind of pushed our season ahead, too. We got started very early in the year. We actually had snow on the infield. There wasn't any snow on the track, but it was quite a sight to see the cars cresting 11 waiting for the green flag with snow on either side. I'm sure it played on a few people's strategies to make sure that they didn't go off that nice clear black surface and into the white. Vehicles with slicks not being very well known for their traction capabilities in snow. So that was quite a sight that we hope to not repeat, but we'll see what happens with next year's calendar. But because of that, we had a very early high-performance driving school. Not many people were ready for it, maybe a little too cold, or they didn't think that it might get pulled off because of the sudden snow. So we may be looking at having another one at the end of the year. So please drop by our car club meetings to make sure that you find out more about that. If you are a member and don't happen to be able to make it to the meetings, or if you just want to check up and see what's happening, we have a car club hotline. We're listed in the phone book in case you don't have a pen handy, or my quick rambling means that you can't get the number jotted down in time. Actually, we might even be quick enough to show it on the screen, who knows. The number is 443-4333. That's simply a message. We try to update it a couple of times a month to give you all of the latest activities. And we don't just concentrate on our own car club activities. There are other clubs in the region. There's a fellow or sister club, Blue Nose Autosport Club in Dartmouth, that really concentrates on rallying, although we seem to be crossing the lines a little bit lately. They're organizing races, we're organizing rallies, but they do hold some events as well, and we try to keep you updated on that, as well as motorcycle racing. We know there are some avid motorcyclists out there who like to go up and watch the racing at AMP. We do have a vintage British Supply Cycle vintage race. I think I have the name right. That's coming up on July 28, 29, and 30th, again at Atlantic Motorsport Park. That's a very interesting event because you see a lot of older vehicles that will just simply come up to park in the parking lot and show off their nice shiny paint, and others, of course, that are intent on competing old Nortons and British bikes that still seem to be running. There are lots of talented people around that can maintain and run those types of vehicles. So that's always an interesting event, even if you're a car buff, to go up and watch something like that. So the Car Club Hotline will keep you up to date on all of those dates and activities, as well as the next date for our own Car Club meeting. So please do attend if you're interested at all. We'd love to see you. Look us up. Ask us any questions that you like. We have another car race coming up on the middle of August, actually, August 19th and 20th. That one will be organized by the Moncton Motorsport Club. We've been fortunate this year. In the past, the Atlantic Sports Car Club has had to organize most of the car racing events at AMP. Other clubs have come on stream and are doing a little more organizing, and it helps give us a bit of time where we can take off or just compete and play and not have to worry about the organizing. And the club for this particular event, is the BAC Club, Blue Nose Autosport Club, organizing our August event. We just had, last weekend, a very successful race day at AMP organized by our Moncton Club. It was quite well attended. Actually, our Grand Prix was pretty well attended, too. We had an hour-long race there. We had very little attrition, and I think that could be attributed to a pretty fine course. It's quite improved over last year, certainly a lot wider. You could actually do racing through corners, whereas last year it was absolutely impossible. And, of course, the addition of the IMSA cars was quite exciting, too. We have lots of footage to bring you just to tantalize you with that and keep you watching down the road. We have another item, actually, to bring you from the Cole Harbour Car Show. These, again, are very interesting to take a camera and wander around. You get a chance during some very quiet times to talk to the people who bring these vehicles out. And I don't know if you're anything like me. Years ago, when they first brought a lot of these car shows to the area, I would look at these older vehicles and wonder how could they transport them all from the States. It was hard to believe that these were local cars kept in garage and local garages, lovingly attended to, probably not even driven in the rain, certainly not in our infamous winter. And always interesting to see the little plaques that would read that they are local entries, and who would have known that that kind of talent and vehicle would be around this area. We like to take the camera out and chat to these people. They're a wealth of knowledge. They're, of course, maybe specialized in one particular item, but we all have varied interests, and if you're looking for ideas, if you're looking for maybe parts availability, it certainly gives you an idea that there is a lot of local items, or are a lot of local items available. We have a particular motorcycle being lovingly restored, a 1947 Sunbeam. Now, actually, I'm not familiar with that model. If you mention Sunbeam, I think car. But this is an old motorcycle in 1947 owned by Harold MacIntosh. And he was able to give us a little insight as to what he had to go through to put the vehicle together and make it show ready for the Cole Harbor Show in 1995, spring of this year. We have that for you now.
Well, I was purchasing old bikes for vocational school, and I happened to run into this one in a fellow's garage. So I bought it, but I thought, well, I'll keep it for myself. So a few years ago, we decided to do her over, and we have a little engineering firm in England that makes all the parts for it, and they'll ship them over to me in 4 or 5 days. So we start fixing her up. So finally, we got to where she is today. It's a Sunbeam 500cc inline upright twin. She has overhead cam, and she has a drive shaft. And it's just a pleasure to drive. Well, this is the drive shaft here. She has a rubber universal joint up front here to make her a little smoother going away. All her electrical components are in this little box. And she has a dry clutch like a car or a truck, and the transmission like a car or a truck. And she's just terrific to drive. We spent 2 years pretty well restoring it. Very little that we have to restore yet. That was a BMW I had during the war. And this is a plaque we won last year with her.
Well, I hope Harold is able to take in the vintage motorcycle race at the end of July. That's exactly the kind of bike that you're likely to see parked up there, and even in some cases competing. That's the British Cycle Supply Pete Strutique vintage race, by the way. Pete Strutique in Bedford. Drop in and say hi to him. He's quite a character, and he goes pretty fast on a bike, too. Something I should mention, because I just thought we're halfway through July already. It doesn't seem like it with the weather outside. It's pretty wet, but heading into August is usually our Highlands Rally time of year. And for you old car club types, you might remember that rally. It's been going on since the early 60s. Actually, that's something else we're going to have for you just as a bit of a teaser down the road. We have a wonderful old black and white tape of a 1962 or 3 Highlands Rally on a dirt road to the Highlands of Cape Breton. We're going to be showing you that, too. However, the bad news is we don't have a Highlands this year. We've had a bit of problems the past few years. One year, a few years ago, it was too wet. The road washed away. The next year, it was too dry, and because of the fire hazard, the forest fire hazard, we were not able to be in the woods at that time of year. Last year, we lost access to the roads. Pulp and paper companies that usually does run around through their back roads were using them, and I don't think we have the roads again for this year. So unfortunately, no Highlands Rally. But we do seem to have a bit of a revived interest in rallying in the club, and not necessarily the performance type where you need to be all strapped in, helmets on both, intercom systems, navigational aids, straight flat-out speed. These simple time, speed, distance rallies where you and that special other can fight about which left you want to take now is making a bit of a revival. Hopefully we'll have a few more of those for you, and we'll let you know when those are coming up, too. Well, very few of us have actually done rallies lately, so we all need some very simple instructions so that we can get around and find our way at the end. Something like the one we just had a few weeks ago, which was an awful lot of fun. So please keep us in mind for any future motorsport activities that you may have on your agenda. Give us a call at our car club hotline, 443-4333. Look us up during our meeting on August the 8th, which is Tuesday, starting at 7:30. Or if you see us in a parking lot in a slalom, doing a slalom course, drop in and say hi. We have fun runs at the end, by the way. One of us can take you around, or you can take your own car around. Certainly a nice, easy way to find out about what's going on with the skill driving events in your life. So we have racing coming up for Atlantic Motorsport Park motorcycles and cars. Another good place for information for motorcycle racing and actually anything to do with Atlantic Motorsport Park is the News Rack in Bedford. Proprietor John Doherty, who is a longtime motorcycle racer, racing friend of both the car club and the motorcycle club, he's able to give you all sorts of information on what's going on at the track. We have remote control car racing there too, and unfortunately I don't have a schedule for that, but that's always interesting to see. So there's lots to see and do. Please drop in and say hi to John. Pick up a magazine, ask him what's going on, but only if you have a spare half hour, because he has lots of information he can always give to you. So we hope you're going to stay tuned. Our regular slot seems to be Thursday evening. We look forward to seeing you next week with another edition of Motorsport Atlantic. My name is Debbie Clark.
I'd like to thank my sponsors, but I don't have any.